Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order, and without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. We have an important hearing today. It's entitled Examining Misconduct and Mismanagement at the National Park Service. In June, National Park Service Director Jarvis testified before this committee about the problems in sexual harassment throughout the Park Service. He suggested that things could potentially get worse before they got better, and boy, was he right. Things have gotten a lot worse. We've certainly been able to illuminate and find more problems that unfortunately have been festering and been in part of the system for far too long. Since Director Jarvis's testimony, numerous park employees from multiple parks have contacted the committee to describe patterns of misconduct at the Park Service. And today we're here to determine what the Park Service is doing to stop the harassment and find out why it keeps happening. There seems to be some patterns here that are just not anything that we should come close to tolerating. These incidents are happening at our country's most beloved parks. From Yellowstone to Yosemite and the Grand Canyon, these are some of the most visited and famous parks literally in the world. Unfortunately, they also face serious management challenges and allegations of disturbing misbehavior. It's difficult often to have these discussions in an open setting, and I warn the parents of young people who may be watching this. Some of this is going to be probably a little touchy and a little inappropriate, but it is what we do in this committee. We illuminate things. We shine the light on them. We are different in the United States of America, as I've said time and time again, in that we are self-critical. And we better come to a reality grip of what's happening, because far too often the people that are accused of this hideous behavior are simply promoted. Maybe they get a bonus, and they just move on. There doesn't seem to be a consequence. In Yosemite, at least 18 employees, 18, have come forward with allegations of harassment, bullying, and a hostile work environment. These employees lay the blame at the top on Dan Neubacher, the superintendent of Yosemite. The Park Service law enforcement official who investigated the allegation in Yosemite concluded this, quote, "The number of employees interviewed that described horrific working conditions lead us to believe that the environment is indeed toxic, hostile, repressive, and harassing." End quote. I don't know that it could get any worse than that, but that is his conclusion. These are the words of the Park Service's own internal investigators, not the committee staff, not the Office of the Inspector General. Currently, Superintendent Neubacher is still running Yosemite. He's still there. If this was the only park suffering from these problems, it would be enough of a serious concern. Yet recent allegations from America's first national park, Yellowstone, are truly beyond pale. They include sexual exploitation, intimidation, retaliation, and sexual harassment so depraved that it is disturbing even to discuss. With accusations so alarming, you would expect the Washington office to step in immediately and ensure that employees in Yellowstone are safe. While I appreciate the decision to call on the Inspector General for assistance, the Park Service must be more aggressive in protecting public service. We see this time and time again. It's not good enough to just say, we're going to ask the Inspector General to do it. The Park Service and the other agencies need to do their job and provide immediate relief, not punt it to somebody else to start doing it. And it's not good enough to just say, we're going to do a survey. I'm tired of hearing about surveys. There's a problem. In our June hearing, we heard about the serious problems at Grand Canyon and Canaveral National Parks. Since then, it was reported that the supervisors who allowed misconduct to occur in these parks were not just left unpunished, some were even promoted. What in the world does it take to get fired from the Park Service? In most of these cases that I've seen, it's not just one he said, she said. Here's a case we're going to talk about today. We got 18 people, 18, who are talking about this. Leaders who fail in their obligations to protect the public or employees, they need to be fired. If they're not going to take action and they're not going to protect the employees of the United States of America, then they should leave. We had hoped our hearing with Director Jarvis would have prompted some change. Instead, it seems to have been treated merely as a speed bump. Based on what we've seen, the response to the crisis has been to require additional training for managers and to realign the EEO, the Equal Employment Opportunity Office, so it reports to Director Jarvis. Here's the problem with Director Jarvis, though. Of course, this is the same director who was removed from overseeing the Park Service's ethics program because his own integrity failures, including lying to the Secretary of Interior. I'm glad to see that Director Jarvis has announced his retirement. I think that should have happened quite some time ago. But it is kind of stunning that the Director of the Park Service is prohibited from administering an ethics program because of his own ethical problems. And then we wonder why we have a hard time implementing ethical reforms or just implementing things at the Park Service. How are line employees supposed to trust the EEO process when the person in charge hasn't followed the rules themselves? Something needs to change, and it needs to change fast. And I'd like to acknowledge we are joined today by 2 Park Service employees testifying in a whistleblower capacity. These brave employees have come forward despite the fear of possible retaliation. Now, I got to tell you, we will have nothing of that. Mr. Cummings and I, Democrats, Republicans, we are united in the idea that we will go to the ends of the earth to protect and support people who step up as whistleblowers. It takes a great deal of guts to come testify before this committee in a volunteer situation and explain what you've seen and heard firsthand. For that, we're exceptionally grateful. It's a difficult thing to do. I'm not sure I can't imagine you ever imagined in your life that you would be in this situation testifying before Congress. But as I said before, we take this responsibility very seriously. We can't fix it if we don't know precisely what it is. We have a pretty good indication of what it is, but to hear from the front lines what's really happening is a pivotal concern to us. We want to thank you for your courage, your willingness to step forward, and we expect candid answers. And we will do all we can to protect you from any sort of reprisals. So now I'd like to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I do indeed thank you for calling this hearing. No employee in the Federal Civil Service should ever feel afraid to come to work. It's a simple statement, but it's very, very important. And no employee should ever feel retaliation. If she steps forward or he steps forward to report misconduct that makes him or her feel afraid or uncomfortable. I thank Kelly Martin, the Chief of Fire and Aviation Management at Yosemite National Park, and Brian Healy, the Fisheries Program Manager at the Grand Canyon, for being here today. I thank them for their courage and their willingness to come forward and share with this committee their experiences over decades of work for the Federal Government. I also thank you for your service. It should not have been necessary for them to be here today to testify. A task force convened some 16 years ago commissioned a study to examine women in law enforcement occupations in the Park Service. Here is what that study found. Some individuals in positions of authority appear to condone, either by their action or inaction, sexual harassment and discrimination. The system used for handling complaints is not trusted by the employees, nor timely in its ability to bring resolution to complaints. That's a major, major problem. It went on to say that employees fear retaliation if complaints are voiced, That was 16 years ago. The task force concluded, and I quote, "It is critical for the National Park Service to show a sense of urgency in ensuring that all employees are working in an environment free from unlawful harassment." The task force developed a 5-year action plan with nearly 30 recommendations to correct deficiencies with handling complaints, recruitment and retention efforts, and sexual harassment prevention. However, the Park Service's own admission, by their own admission, few of these recommendations were ever implemented. Obviously, there were folks that did not consider it to be that important. They did not feel the sense of urgency. And so that task force report was filed away, put on a shelf, gathering dust, ignored. 16 years later, the Inspector General has issued a report finding, and I quote, "The evidence of a long-term pattern of sexual harassment and hostile workforce environment in the Grand Canyon District, River District." 16 years later, the Inspector General has issued a report finding, and I quote, "A pattern of harassment involving a law enforcement supervisor at the Canaveral National Seashore." And 16 years later, members of the committee, allegations have been made at Yosemite and Yellowstone National Parks about possible harassment, hostile work environments, and even sexual exploitation. Today's hearing will enable us to hear from the Park Service regarding the specific measures it has implemented to ensure that all employees work in facilities where sexual harassment is not tolerated, and the agency's culture welcomes and supports a workforce that reflects the diversity of our nation. I want to hear about the specific reforms that the Park Service has implemented to ensure that all complaints are handled in a fair, timely, and thorough and consistent manner. I want to hear about the reform that have been implemented to ensure that the disciplinary process yields consistent and fair discipline across all Park Service facilities and cannot be abused to retaliate against employees who file complaints. And I want to hear about the reforms that have been implemented to bring the Park Service's Equal Employment Opportunity Program into compliance with the standards of a model program. In Ms. Martin's prepared testimony, she wrote, and I quote, "With steadfast resolve to work together and confront the serious and subtle misconduct issues we currently face, we will set a North Star for culture change for the next generation of the National Park Service employees. With the commitment of employees like Ms. Martin and Mr. Healy, I'm confident that we are on the right course to correct longstanding patterns of harassment and retaliation in the Park Service. I thanked them before, but I want to thank them again, because they're not only here about themselves and things that they've seen, but they are trying to make sure that the Park Service is a place that's welcoming to generations yet unborn. However, to make the changes that clearly need to be made, we have to hold the Park Service's feet to the fire. 16 years ago, there were those that sat in these same chairs and tried to hold feet to the fire, but apparently the fire was not hot enough. Well, we're going to have to do it again. It's been 99 days since our last hearing. Our committee should continue to hold hearings on the Park Service every 99 days until all employees feel safe coming to work and reporting misconduct whenever and wherever it occurs. As I've often said from this committee during committee hearings, when I see things that are not right, I often say we're better than that, and we are better than that. And I want to thank our witnesses for coming forward to help us get to where we have to go. With that, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. I will hold the record open for 5 legislative days for members who would like to submit a written statement. We'll now recognize our panel of witnesses. It starts with Mr. Michael Reynolds, Deputy Director for Operations at the National Park Service of the United States Department of the Interior. Ms. Kelly Martin is the Chief of Fire and Aviation Management at Yosemite National Park, the National Park Service, the United States Department of the Interior, and Mr. Brian Healy, Fisheries Program Manager at the Grand Canyon National Park, the National Park Service, and the United States Department of the Interior. We thank you all for being here. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses are to be sworn before they testify. So if you will please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated. Let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. In order to allow time for discussion, we would appreciate your limiting your verbal comments to 5 minutes, but we're going to be pretty lenient on that. If you go over, you'll be just fine. Your entire written record will be submitted as part of the record. Mr. Reynolds, you are now recognized. And you got to make sure you turn it on, but bring that microphone uncomfortably close to your mouth. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to update the committee on steps the National Park Service has taken to address sexual harassment cases at the Grand Canyon National Park and Canaveral National Seashore, as well as the broader issue of harassment in the workplace. The cases at the Grand Canyon and Canaveral were more than a wake-up call for the National Park Service. They presented us with a clear and undeniable evidence that we, as we begin our second century of service, must extend the same commitment to the employees of the National Park Service as we make to the protection of our nation's most extraordinary places. On behalf of the senior leadership of the National Park Service and the majority of our 20,000-plus employees who are outstanding, honorable public servants, I share your disgust with the behavior that the Inspector General outlined in these reports. In response to those situations, the leadership team at the National Park Service has committed to making substantial and long-term culture changes at the agency to prevent sexual harassment and to ensure that every employee has a safe and respectful work environment. This kind of change is neither easy nor fast. We will need to develop trust and support among our employees, visitors, and Congress to make the changes that are undeniably necessary. This hearing today is one step in that journey. Prior to becoming Deputy Director in August, I worked in many parks and regional offices throughout my 30 years with the National Park Service. As a Regional Director for the Midwest and more recently as the Associate for Workforce and Inclusion, my focus has been accountability and performance management and change. As the new Deputy Director, I am personally committed to providing a culture of transparency, inclusion, respect, and accountability, and making this a safe place for employees to work. We want to become a model agency. We will become a model agency. I will start by outlining the specific actions we have taken at the Grand Canyon and Canaveral since we last testified here in June. Since the June 14th hearing at the Grand Canyon, we have appointed a new superintendent, Christine Lennertz, closed the river district within the canyon for now in terms of the rangers running the program, taken actions to hold employees accountable for misconduct, and acted on an 18 action item recommendations in response to the OIG report. At Canaveral, we have removed the chief ranger accused of sexual harassment from his duties at the park, moved the superintendent into a detail assignment with the regional office, and initiated the process of moving forward with actions to hold employees accountable for misconduct. Employees and supervisors at both parks have received mandatory sexual harassment prevention, reporting, and response training sessions. Nationally, we are working with the Department of the Interior to take steps to eradicate sexual harassment and to change the NPS culture. Some of these include mandated online training for all managers and employees and distributing new NPS-specific guides service-wide, additional focused training for EEO, human resources, and employer relations staff to support the workforce, the professionals that would support the workforce. New reporting options, including a hotline and an ombuds office, which will be operational within weeks to serve as an independent and confidential resource for employees. A service-wide workforce harassment survey to be conducted later this year. An EEO office that now reports directly to the director and will receive additional support for their critical work. Updated policies that provide guidance to employees on harassment, equal employment opportunities, discrimination, and diversity, and a mandatory 14-day deadline for completing anti-harassment inquiries. These efforts will be insufficient without a long-term plan to fundamentally change the culture of the National Park Service. Culture change begins with leadership commitment and accountability, and is sustained through ongoing training, education, and employee engagement. In our centennial year, NPS leadership has refocused on what we want the service to look like in its second century and are committed to a transparent process focused on accountability to make the improvements that our employees want and deserve. This needs to be done very urgently. Thank you again for inviting me to testify before you today. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. Ms. Martin, you're now recognized.
Chairman Chavez, Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee, I was requested before you today to discuss my personal experience with employee misconduct with the National Park Service. My name is Kelly Martin, and I am the Chief of Fire and Aviation Management at Yosemite National Park. I've been in my current position for over 10 years. Prior to Yosemite, I worked for the Forest Service for 16 years. Between the two agencies, I have 32 years of distinguished service to the American people. I am here before you today as a citizen and on behalf of many of our public land management women leaders. My testimony provided for this hearing focuses on management diligence to address misconduct over the course of my career. My motivation for this statement is for greater focus and scrutiny on the culture created when leaders of our organization fail to take disciplinary action and to hold perpetrators accountable for their actions. It is not without note the vast majority of individuals who have devoted their life work find working for the National Park Service is an honorable and noble profession, myself included. I am here before you today to tell you my story, but more importantly to provide testimony regarding the dark clouds of misconduct that remains elusive from public view. When I began working for the National Park Service as a college student in 1984, I was sure I found my dream job, living and working in the outdoors with those who share the value of the importance of public lands and improving resources for the American public. Imagine for 1 minute being 20-something again. We have an idealistic view of the world that is equitable and just. My idealist view was soon shattered when I became victim of sexual harassment, not once, but 3 times. One of my perpetrators was repeatedly caught engaging in voyeuristic behavior, all the while receiving promotions within the National Park Service until his recent retirement as Deputy Superintendent. This is very difficult to sit before you today. I'm not boastful of the history of my sexual harassment experiences. As a matter of fact, this is the first time I have come out publicly to describe the painful scars of my past in a hopeful effort to eliminate these kinds of experiences from happening to young women entering our workforce today. I did find my own way to push past these experiences and decided to preserve my opportunity for career advancement. My experiences would go unreported until now. This is a highly personal decision a woman must make, and it is almost always an embarrassing, arduous situation to endure. What brings me to testify today is due to a hostile work environment situation in Yosemite National Park, where dozens of individuals have come forward with personal statements of demoralizing behaviors to include acts of bullying, gender bias, and favoritism. While not rising to the notoriety of sexual harassment, equally damaging behavior patterns that create a hostile work environment are more pervasive than one might think and is unlikely confined to one park like Yosemite, as you will hear today. The time has come to recognize hostile work environments affect our employees on a day-to-day basis in our agency. All members of a team that allow a toxic work environment to persist are complicit in the negative effects that result in a decrease in employee morale and productivity. The subtle and overt nuances of a hostile work environment erodes human dignity and diminishes the full potential of our most valued resource, the people who care so deeply in the mission of the National Park Service and their desire to reach their personal and professional aspirations. We owe this to our future generation of women and men leaders who our agency desperately needs to guide us through our current human resource challenges. As I walk through my 32 years of service, I want to leave here today with a strong conviction of hope. Hope for the future generation of the Park Service conservation leaders that will not know what it is like to experience sexual harassment, gender and racial discrimination, sexism, and hostile work environments. Hope for national direction to encourage engagement of women and men at the smallest work unit to recognize and thwart negative behavior patterns at its incipient stage. Hope we can identify misconduct and take swift and appropriate action against perpetrators. I also recognize our agency has many great men who will come forward to be courageous mentors and champions of women's contributions and encourage and support an equitable work environment. As the Chief of Fire and Aviation at Yosemite, I aim to bring courage and inspiration to many women I am here representing today who are hopeful that my full written testimony will be the catalyst that is needed for change in our culture that is accepting of everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share my experiences and concerns as the current situation of the National Park Service is dire and needs immediate attention to ensure future generations of employees have access to a workplace free from harassment and hostile work environments. I will be happy to answer any questions you have of me at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Healy, you're now recognized.
Good afternoon, Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I hope the information that I share will provide additional insight into the full scope of the sexual harassment and hostile work environment issues at Grand Canyon and the efforts of the National Park Service to address the misconduct at the park. The vast majority of Grand Canyon employees believe in the NPS mission, are hardworking, selfless, and willing to cooperate to meet management goals. Nevertheless, as this committee has seen in the Office of Inspector General's report on the pervasive misconduct within the River District, there are exceptions. My testimony today may anger some of my coworkers and managers. Based on my experiences, I feel as if my career, my safety, and the safety of other employees at the park may be at some risk, even though there are numerous legal protections in place for whistleblowers. Thus, I'm using caution in how I characterize these experiences to protect the privacy of individual victims and witnesses. I know this committee is particularly interested in the NPS response to the findings of misconduct by the OIG. I can report on the progress of 12 of the action items proposed by the Park Service and how they have impacted operations and employees at the park. First, in August, a boat operator that was implicated in many of these sexual harassment incidents has been removed from his position. In addition, training sessions were held to address sexual harassment reporting and confidentiality. The training also provided recommendations on responding to reference checks on former River District employees, and the agency is making progress on the development of a hotline for reporting harassment. However, some actions did not have their desired impact. By shutting down Grand Canyon's River District and contracting river logistical support, we learned that we have very limited ability to prohibit problem boat operators from returning to work as contractors on NPS science trips. In addition, innocent employees that had worked at the River District may be negatively impacted by having their duties changed, or in the case of temporary employees, they lost work. We could have avoided this uncomfortable situation altogether if employees and supervisors were held accountable for their misconduct. Accountability is elusive for managers. The Deputy Superintendent remains in a position in my chain of command, and the River District Supervisor was assigned to a temporary Chief Ranger position at another park. While only a temporary position, this appeared to be a promotion to Grand Canyon employees. The OIG found this individual and the Deputy Superintendent had distributed confidential information related to victims of sexual harassment to the perpetrators, which is a violation of regulations and potentially put the victim's safety at risk. In addition, despite reasonable and cost-effective alternatives, the Deputy Superintendent forced my work group to continue to work with the River District, which had become a hostile work environment in 2015. The culture of bullying and harassment is not limited to the River District, nor have all the issues been addressed. Beginning in 2013, I reported multiple instances of bullying and threatened behavior by members of Grand Canyon's trail crew and the program manager to the superintendent, deputy superintendent, and human resources staff. Examples included retaliation by some members of the trail crew directed toward an assault victim that had reported her assault to law enforcement. The assault victim's confidentiality was breached, and she was labeled with an expletive by members of the trail crew. The use of a misogynistic slur in reference to a female senior manager by the trail crew program manager, which was reported by a witness, and the witness was later allegedly threatened with violence by the program manager on 2 occasions. According to those involved, it appeared that NPS managers did not follow through with appropriate investigations, and in some cases made excuses for this behavior. An investigation into these incidents involving the trail crew, which occurred in 2013 and 2014, was finally initiated in April 2016 by the Intermountain region, but the findings have yet to be reviewed 5 months later. Years of unchecked misconduct by the River District and some members of the trail crew, and the termination of 2 employees that had reported sexual harassment have had a severe impact on employee morale, productivity, and perceived workplace safety. Witnesses and victims remain fearful. I have heard the term, "I was afraid to report harassment because I feared retaliation," countless times in my 7 years at Grand Canyon. Reporting is also discouraged. I was told that the deputy superintendent viewed me as a whiner, and my own supervisor was pressured to lower my performance rating due to, quote, "Brian's problems with the River District and trail crew." In closing, our new superintendent has pledged to improve the work environment for all employees. She indicated that we have much work to do. This summer, the regional office received almost 100 complaints or concerns related to workplace issues at Grand Canyon. Cultural change is difficult and will take time. The retention and promotion of managers that are perceived to be implicated in wrongdoing may continue, which will discourage future reporting of harassment and challenge employee morale and confidence in NPS leadership. I sincerely hope that this testimony will lead to continued positive change in the agency. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from Wyoming, one of the most beautiful states, perhaps second only to Utah, but one of the more beautiful ones, and the home of one of our most treasured national parks. We'll now like to recognize Ms. Lummis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're primarily focused here on Grand Canyon and Yosemite National Parks, but it seems that more problems are cropping up in the system. Mr. Reynolds, are you aware of allegations by Bob Hester of misconduct among employees at Yellowstone National Park?
Yes.
Okay. Well, in an article published in the Montana Pioneer just before Labor Day weekend, Mr. Hester alleges that there was sexual harassment and exploitation as well as retaliation by supervisors at Yellowstone. The article mentions allegations also of financial misconduct. Now, who is currently investigating these allegations?
The IG, Inspector General.
Have they begun interviewing witnesses?
The last information, as I understand, is they have not, but they have an arrival date of September 27th in the park.
When was the outside investigator scheduled to begin interviewing?
I had a first phone call around September 3rd, and I believe the following week, the week of the 5th, Superintendent Dan Wenk began to put together the right mechanisms to bring in an independent investigation team.
One of the things that concerns me, Mr. Chairman, about this is that in instances where the superintendent of a park is not implicated in the charges or the allegations of sexual misconduct, and then attempts to investigate it or initiate an investigation quickly, that maybe the IG stops the investigation that's going on. I think that this was the case in Yellowstone, where Superintendent Wenk was beginning an investigation and bringing in outside investigators to do an independent inquiry, and then was prevented from doing so because the IG was brought in, thereby delaying the opportunity to obtain statements while people's memories were fresh, and potentially providing for the opportunity for certain of the alleged perpetrators to retire. So trying to balance, how can we protect employees? How can we protect the people who, like Mr. Healy and Ms. Martin, who are bringing this information forward, and at the same time make sure that these investigations are conducted in a timely manner.
I agree completely with your concerns. One of our new policy shifts that I alluded to in my testimony that we're doing with our EEO program is to establish these third-party investigation units that would be able to swiftly go in. I'm going to recommend a 24 to 48-hour turnaround once we have a report. Superintendent Wenck had begun that process. I would like to have further conversations with the IG. I think they're doing absolutely their job to come in and do this. I'm not sure that they want to have a clean investigation, and so they did ask us to stand down a third-party investigator, but I know the superintendent has expressed his dismay to me about how he's worried about the time for that. So we agree.
Okay, well, in the case of Mr. Wenck, there were no allegations against him. There were no allegations, to my knowledge, that he knew and looked the other way. But what about the case where that is not true? What about the case where the superintendent of a national park is implicated? How do you deal with that situation?
It's very important that we have somebody from the outside managing that process so that you don't have any problems, if you will, tainting an investigation, right? So our policy is to develop, in one example, we have a different region, an EEO director from a different regional office of the other park to direct the investigation and to work with the regional office. In our chain, we have 7 regions that oversee these different parks. So to bring in some sort of third party that way is our current plan and our current policy.
Well, and before my time is gone, I want you to know that we're going to be watching the National Park Service and the way that Ms. Martin is treated and Mr. Healy is treated and other whistleblowers are treated as a consequence of their bringing these allegations forward, and that we're going to be watching the National Park Service, because this should not be tolerated, it should not be unaddressed, and it has been inadequately addressed. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this hearing. Mr. Reynolds, we are very grateful for how the National Park Service runs most of our neighborhood parks. It's not just the mall, but our neighborhood parks are owned by the National Park Service. We have good relationships with the Park Service. I want to know if this, notice that these 2 parks where these allegations, these issues have come from are in the West. Are they ours? Are people quartered together? Or are these nationwide problems?
And Congressman, if I can ask, just to clarify, do you mean, in other words, are these unique problems to these parks?
To the western part of the United States, where parks, these large parks, where there are cabins. I don't understand whether or not the staff are quartered there instead of going home the way my own Park Service rangers do.
Right. So 413 units nationwide, very diverse system now.
I'm talking about those
and
western units.
in these 2 parks, and I would be happy to let Ms. Martin and Mr. Healy also comment. Things can be exacerbated when you have communities, much like a military base, living and working together.
Let me ask you both. Do you live in the park where you are located, in cabins, men and women, or how do you operate? Since the only parks I know are the urban parks.
At Grand Canyon, there's many employees are housed on the South Rim, but then there's times when they're working out of bunkhouses in the inner canyon in the backcountry. I work in Flagstaff, which is about an hour-and-a-half drive away. So
Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I do live in Yosemite Valley and in a cabin, and a lot of our seasonal staff that's on our fire crew will be housed in, say, one house or one bunk quarters. There are certainly opportunities there that could potentially lead to a hostile type of environment. especially with our young folks. So we do have close quarters that men and women do live and work in a regular basis.
Which should caution the National Park Service to take such matters into account. Mr. Healy, I was reading your testimony on page 8. You speak of a contractor. This doesn't go specifically to sexual harassment, but it goes to issues like you name alcohol abuse, drug use. So I'm interested in how the policies relate to contractors. I was chair of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I wasn't aware that contractors were treated any differently, but I do note that you say in your testimony that you were informed that your concerns about the misconduct were not considered when the contract was awarded. I suppose I should ask Mr. Reynolds, why are matters like drug abuse of a contractor, alcohol abuse, I take it maybe even sexual harassment, are not taken into account when a contract is awarded?
They should be for any on-duty thing, and I'll be happy to investigate what happened in this contracting process.
I wish you would, because it said, Mr. Healy said that he was specifically informed that his concerns were not considered, not even considered. That's what caught my eye when the contract was awarded.
I would be very concerned about that if that is true, and I will be happy to get right back
And we'd like to know whether or not they are considered generally, or whether that was an exception, and if you'd let the chairman know so that we can
certainly I
know
can
that.
tell you, and I think Mr. Healy will back me up, for any on-duty, if you will, period of contract performance, that should be standard language in any contract.
I would think
To your point, when you're living and working 24 hours a day, if you will, on the river, that may be where we have some.
Yeah, but Mr. Healy, there was a similar report 16 years ago about this systemic harassment of women, and there were specific recommendations made. Are you aware of that report? I mean, we're here again 16 years later. Are you aware of that task force report about similar problems?
The Women in Law Enforcement report?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
When did you become first aware of that report? And
don't-
were any of its recommendations implemented?
No, they were not, as far as I can ever figure out. There were, as the chairman actually mentioned, 30 different recommendations. I think things were worked on during that time frame. I wasn't involved at the time.
Of course.
But
How can we be assured that any recommendations, either from this committee or from similar task forces, since it worked on but full implementation apparently did not occur? So we're back here again 16 years later.
yeah, it's a very regrettable action that did not occur.
Finally, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask, apparently in that report, 16.3% of the Park Service women in law enforcement, park ranger and special agents were women. What is the percentage of women in those positions today?
I believe we have about 247 women in law enforcement out of about a force of 1,664. So
do the math.
not the best in math, but about 15% or so.
You're going down, not up. One of the first things that agencies and private sector does when this problem recurs is to, of course, increase the number of women in law enforcement or in the applicable mission.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Walberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the panel for being here, and we hope this is very worthwhile for yourselves, but also for the people you serve with, having spent many weeks in national parks, north, south, east, and west as a kid with my family, camping, hiking, fishing, and then with my family doing the same thing, even as I look forward to being out in Glacier National Park this next August. Impressive territories we have, impressive treasures we have, and in every case, my experience has been treated with great respect and professionalism by the staff. So it is concerning to hear some of the behind the scenes. And though we deal with humans, yet these type of things have to be addressed. So thank you for being here. Ms. Kelly, Can you describe for this committee some of Superintendent Neubacher's behavior that you observed which prompted the investigation?
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. Myself personally, I have been the chief there at Yosemite for the last 10 years, and the marker point for me was when we had the rim fire of 2013, and I happened to be off unit on another fire and returning. My duties have been to act as the agency administrative representative for the superintendent when we have large incidents in the park. I returned, I told my supervisor I would be returning and I could assume those duties, and for whatever unknown reason, I was not allowed to perform those duties that is part of my official duties of my job within the park. It was for myself personally, discrediting my professionalism, and it was humiliating for me to not be able to perform that job and that function in front of my peers, our interagency, wildfire cooperators, and even our park internal staff, that I was not able to provide that leadership.
Any rational reason given to you for that?
No, sir.
Any reason at all?
No, sir.
So it was just an arbitrary decision that was made by Superintendent Neubacher to not allow you to function?
I requested to be able to split the duties between myself, and I have a very competent deputy fire chief that took over two roles, both the agency administrator, and then he was also in the role of incident commander trainee. I'm confounded as to why I was not able to truly perform in that role.
In your testimony, you mentioned the fear of retaliation for speaking out about what was happening at the park. Can you describe for us this concern and where it stems from, and are you aware of other employees that share the same concern?
The fear of retaliation, the fear of coming forward is not necessarily in our culture to come forward and to describe hostile type of situations or a toxic type of environment. Ours is certainly dealing more with a hostile work environment. It's not dealing with sexual harassment. So that's not at issue right here. But people do not fear, or they do fear that they are not safe in bringing issues to management. And one of the concerns that I've heard is that within Yosemite National Park, we have a superintendent, and our deputy superintendent position has been vacant for 3 years. So unfortunately, there's a concentration of decision-making within one person, and it's not necessarily shared within the deputy superintendent and the superintendent.
Has that been done for a purpose, keeping it, keeping the vacancy there?
I'm unaware of why that would remain vacant for the last 3 years.
Do you believe Superintendent Neubacher's actions to be an isolated incident, or are they reflective of a larger cultural problem within the National Park Service?
It's hard for me to address the larger cultural, but I have reason to believe that it probably is a larger cultural type of issue. I do believe that it is important for the image to be in-house and for us to kind of take care of things in-house and not be able to share these types of issues publicly. But I think it's very, very important for the women that have left, the women that are currently there at Yosemite, to really understand in daylight what it is, what the behaviors that are exhibited that really truly cost people's integrity and a reduction in morale.
Well, thank you for your testimony, and I yield back.
The gentleman yield. I have just a follow-up to that. Mr. Reynolds, there's two things the committee would like to see. You have been unwilling so far to give us the expedited inquiry into the Yosemite situation. Is that something you will provide to the committee?
Mr. Chairman, we did give your staff, I think they call it an on-camera, not sure what that means.
In camera, yeah.
In camera, visible. and I know you're concerned about it. I know we've had some exchange and correspondence. I'll continue to work with our folks on it. It is an active investigation, I guess, is the short answer that I could give you. I am not unwilling to share with you data when I can. I just don't want to infringe on
It's
what
something
we're
in your
doing.
possession, and Congress would like to see it. So can you name anything that we shouldn't be able to see? Is there anything classified in there?
No, and I don't disagree with your ability to get that. I'm just hampered a
Wait,
little
wait,
bit by
wait, wait.
process.
Don't disagree with my, you won't give it to us.
At the moment, we're having conversations about how to do
But
that.
why should we, what's the conversation? What's the hesitation?
To be candid with you, sir, to keep the investigative process as clean as we can while we're getting into
So you don't trust Congress? Is that what you're saying? It would make it dirty?
No, that's not what I mean.
Well, you said it would, you're trying to keep it clean and you won't give it to Congress, so.
It's just for public data purposes during an investigation. But I will pledge to you to continue to work.
No, I want you to pledge to give it to Congress.
I understand that, sir.
Do you need a subpoena? What do you need? Who makes this decision?
It will be a decision that I'll talk over with our solicitors predominantly.
I would also like to see anybody who's been fired, dismissed, or retired from Yellowstone since 2013. Is that something you can give to us?
Yes, I can.
When will you give that to us?
I will give it to you within 48 hours.
Fair enough. Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings.
I want to pick up where the gentleman left off a few minutes ago. This whole thing of retaliation, and as I was listening to you, Ms. Martin, I could not help but think about the question of how do you tackle a culture. It's not easy. In the Baltimore City Police Department, I'd asked for a patterns and practice investigation. And the reason why I asked for it is because we had people in the department, good policemen, who knew that things were going bad and wrong, but they did not feel comfortable talking about it because they were worried that they would be retaliated against, their comrades would do some things that might be harmful to them. And when we got that patterns and practice report, it was 10 times worse, 10 times, and probably 20 than I ever imagined with regard to African-American men and the way they were being treated by police. So, Mr. Healy, you said something that really kind of struck me. It said, I feel as if my career and possibly my safety and the safety of other Grand Canyon employees may be at some risk. That's a hell of a statement. And it's one that I feel pain that you even have to even think it, let alone say it. And the mere fact that you have said it in a public forum puts you even, I would assume, even more jeopardy. It's one thing to think it, it's another thing to say it, it's another thing to say it in a public forum. What can we do to help? Because as I see it, the culture that I talked about before, and I think that Ms. Martin is alluding to, and probably you too, is one that is, you almost have to dig deep and pry out probably a lot of folks and almost start over again. So I'm trying to figure out, what is your hope? I mean, what do you hope? I mean, I'm sure you've thought about this, said to yourself, there's got to be a better way. How do you see that way? Because let me tell you something. The reason why I'm raising this is because, in my opening, I talked about 16 years ago. Guess what? Most of these people weren't even here. None of them. none of these people were here 16 years ago, except me. They weren't even here. So another group of Congress people were addressing this supposedly, and yet it has not been corrected, and the culture grows and metastasizes and gets worse. So, and you've come here, and I want you all to be effective and efficient. See, I not only do I know that you have your concerns about retaliation, about your comrades being all upset, but it would be a damn shame if you came here, you gave your testimony, and this is my great fear, and then was not effective and efficient in what you tried to do. Well, that's a lose-lose all the way around. You go back and they said, why'd you do that? And then it gets worse. And so help me in looking at what you've seen. I think Ms. Norton said one thing, Mr. Martin. She talked about having more women in key positions and law enforcement and supervisory positions. But what do you see? I mean, how would you like to see us try to break this culture? And do you have confidence? You made some complimentary statements, Mr. Healy, about some of the things you've seen being done, but then you came right back and talked about the negative impact of some of the positive things that were supposedly being that were happening. So help us. Help us help you.
Thank you. I think what would help is that if we can ensure that these people that have come forward to me to ask for assistance in reporting things are protected to the same extent that I am. And I think, in preparing for this testimony, I went back to some of these individuals that had bad experiences at the park, and I asked them to help me deliver that message here. And I heard a lot of fear from those people, and there's individuals at the park that have, as I mentioned in my testimony, threatened people with violence, and they're still there. And I think holding those people accountable is a really good step, and I'm not really sure how Congress can assist the Park Service in doing that, but that would be a good first step. And then the other thing you mentioned was, you alluded to the shutting down the river district and the river contracting. Those decisions were made, I'm not sure who made the decisions, but there's definitely no consultation with folks on the ground that are doing the work like myself or my coworkers that have experience and understand the risks in making some of those decisions. And I think if the Park Service leadership were to more effectively engage its employees in developing solutions for these problems, we would go a long way.
What about you, Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. I believe that we really have to start with the awareness of the culture that's been created over the years. And we have to really, like you said, we have to root it out. We have to really understand what's at the root of this type of culture and this type of behavior that then supports sexual harassment and hostile work environments. I think that's truly our first step is awareness of the issues of how those behaviors actually ascend to these types of situations.
Now, Mr. Martin, I've been on the Naval Academy Board of Visitors for about 10 years now. And one of the things, we had a major sexual harassment problem. And what we found is that a lot of the midshipmen, I'm going to something that you just said because I want to make sure I'm clear. A lot of the midshipmen were doing things that were harassment, and they claim, and some of them I believe, some of them I'm not sure about, said they didn't even know it was harassment. I mean, can you comment on that? You said you just talked about awareness. Go ahead.
At some point, we have to create an environment that's open and transparent with our leadership to really be able to talk about these hard issues. And until we get there, we're going to continue to have these misunderstandings between management and employees as to he said, she said. And until we get to that point that we can then provide this transparency and really expose it for what it is. We need to really talk about the behaviors and be able to communicate that. Right now, there's so much fear in being able to communicate what that is. And so I see that as, number one, the awareness of the culture that we've created, and then being able to communicate what it is that creates these types of situations.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, please.
And then at that point, how do we then best educate our employees so that we don't have these kinds of hearings 16 years from now or 5 years from now? We got to think about things differently in terms of how we can be more communicative, with our senior leaders. Right now, that's not happening.
And now that you've heard what they just said, Mr. Reynolds, can you tell us how, I get frustrated because, I know we're going to hear you say a lot of nice things about what you're going to do, and, but to convince us that you get it and that your folks get it, because I'm telling you, after these lights go out, and then they got to go back. They got to go back. I mean, how do you assure them and people coming into the service or want to come into the service or people that are there that they don't have to go through this crap? This is crazy.
Yes.
And unacceptable.
First off, I will join you in protecting my colleagues.
And how are you going to do that?
Well, the first thing I'll do is we really need to dive into the cultural issues as well as, if you will, the fundamentals.
But what about the person who's watching us right now, who's sitting there laughing and just I can't wait till they get back. I got something for them.
Yeah.
I'm going to hurt them. I'm going to do something to them. How do you deal with that person? Those people? Because apparently there are quite a few.
We can't let those lights go off. We have to not have any darkness, right? It has to be very transparent from here forward. There has to be an accountability that everybody can see and touch. There also, with our culture, we're trying to pull together some parts of our organization. So, for example, we've never really had affinity groups in the National Park Service, women's groups, or other employee groups that might come together, and we're trying to attempt to do that in order for there to be a cohort that can be another protective kind of place that people, a safe place, if you will, to also for management that then to be required to listen to those groups and to those employees about what the concerns might be.
All right, thank you very much.
Now I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Heiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on the actions of Director Jarvis, I think further oversight of the National Park Service is desperately needed. This is actually my third hearing on this matter. As a part of oversight, we, of course, were here in June, but also Natural Resources Subcommittee. We were with Director Jarvis in May. And I want to thank Ms. Martin and Mr. Healy for your testimony this afternoon and what you've endured. But Director Reynolds, let me start with you. Based on your testimony, I know that you're aware of the sexual harassment cases, specifically at Cape Canaveral, the operation there. Can you tell me just how many complaints, the total complaints, came from there, even those that are ongoing or resolved cases?
Yes, Congressman, I believe there's about 3 complaints, but I believe there might be a few more IG reports that I'll follow up on a confirmation with you on that.
Okay, there's actually been 4. And in fact, the Washington Post reported in early July that 4 investigations there since 2012 is an unusually high number, they said, for such a small operation of the National Park Service. And as you just mentioned, these are just the ones that we know about. As has been testified to today, people are scared. Who knows how many other cases have been swept under the rug because of the culture of fear. During the time of these investigations since 2012, who was the superintendent in charge?
In 2012, I believe it was Superintendent Pelfrey.
That's correct. And I don't represent the good people of Florida, but just yesterday came across an article in the Florida Today, and they reported, like I said just yesterday, that Superintendent Pelfrey is promoted to a position of special assistant to the Southeast Regional Director. Are you aware of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as she has been promoted, she gets to work at home. She gets a comfortable $116,000 salary. And you mentioned in your testimony a few moments ago that the chief ranger at Cape Canaveral was no longer at the location there, but you failed to mention that the superintendent has received a promotion to the Southeast Regional Director. Do you know where the Southeast Regional Director office is located?
It's in Atlanta, and if I could offer, sir, that...
No, let me go on.
Okay.
It is in Atlanta, and that's in my backyard. And that raises a great deal of concern for me personally. You're also aware that Director Jarvis testified here in Congress over a book deal where he failed to secure proper permission for that book. You're aware of that?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, my point in all of this is the pattern that is clearly unfolding before us. Obviously, under the direction of Director Jarvis, there's unaccountability, there's poor management, unsafe work environment, and that has permeated throughout the National Park Service. And what is the consequence from Director Jarvis? I mean, he gets a mere slap on the wrist. He has to go through some silly monthly ethics training once a month, watch a video or something for the duration of his time. And so here is what people are getting at the Park Service. These type of slaps on the wrist and or promotions. I mean, this is just insane. This is absolute insanity. And Mr. Chairman, on June 16th, I wrote a letter to the President Obama, asking for the resignation of Director Jarvis, and I actually have a copy of that letter here that I'd like to go in the record.
He's asking unanimous consent without objection, so ordered.
And while I understand Director Jarvis is going to retire in January, what we've heard yet again here today and what continues to be prevalent in the National Park Service, I just wanted on record that I stand by my position in requesting the immediate resignation of Director Jarvis. And with that, sir, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. We now recognize the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welsh, for 5 minutes.
You know, the National Park Service is a great treasure. It's unbelievable. We've all been to the national parks, and I go to one every year, so it's pretty sad to hear about this. And my experience, just as a visitor, as a hiker, is one of just enormous appreciation for the staff that I meet from the bottom on up. It's really, really quite wonderful. And my sense is that in general, there's just an enormous appreciation for the work that people do. And my sense, too, is that the people who work there, it's a way of life for them. They love the outdoors, they love nature, they love the history and tradition. So it's very sad that also part of it is a situation that you all have been describing. But I want to thank all three of you, actually, for the work you've done and for coming forward. I'll start with you, Mr. Reynolds. You know, the culture on this has got to be, in a way, zero tolerance. And the culture in how employees are expected to work does come from the top. And that has to be imbued from the top down and then reinforced in every way. So what concrete steps can you take to do that? If the leadership doesn't take this deadly seriously, then no one else will.
We have to get this right. This has to be our top priority. One of the first things that I would like to do, I'm in day 52 here in this new job. So I'm just, I found the bathroom, so now we need to get going on some very big focus through the chains of command. We'll be meeting next week with some of the field leadership, and I would like to be able to tell them at that point what we plan to do with a diversity and inclusion outfit that would be tied to my office, and that can start working on the cultural issues. Because you're right, it is,
Well,
we have some of the most outstanding public employees, as these
You-
two
you
represent,
do, but, you know
and we
what?
have to give them that kind of management.
yeah, but I don't quite know what that means, what you just said. I don't think it takes a big meeting. It's like, look, folks, any unwanted advances just aren't allowed. I mean, how complicated is that?
We have put out quite a bit of extensive refresher, if you will, and reminder and zero tolerance policy. But I agree with you, and I think it needs to be a step further, which is actions. Actions will be louder than words in this, in terms of the
Yeah, but
accountability.
The action is, I think, all the people in management have to meet with their staff, and they have to have a discussion and basically say it. It's not complicated. They have to say it and mean it. And then on the other hand, we also want to get more women into leadership positions as well.
Right.
All right.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
sorry.
will. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Reynolds, what was your job before this new job? What were you doing at the Park Service?
I was the Associate Director for Workforce. here in
Yes, so you were in charge of HR. Don't lead Mr. Welch to believe that you're in day 54 and, hey, I'm the new kid on the block. You've been running the HR department at the Park Service since 2014. So your words are a little bit hollow in your, hey, well, we got to do some refresher. And can you give me a single instance where you said you have a zero tolerance policy? Are you kidding me? Show me an example of zero tolerance.
Well, first off, I understand your perception, and I've been dealing with revamping the whole systems and process of Workforce. Haven't gotten there yet. We have the zero tolerance policy, and I guess my point is, it's putting it into action.
It's gentleman's time. It's Mr. Welch's time, but you haven't gotten there yet. You had the job. When did you first take on that job in Human Resources?
2 years ago.
I know, but give me a month in 2014.
April of 14.
Okay. Sorry, it's your time, but
No, I appreciate your questions. Here's my view on this. We can have personnel policies, and we can write down the thises and the that's, and it can be 10 pages or 500 pages. None of it means anything other than what is the culture that people in that environment are expected to live by. And people respond much more to a reinforced culture because it's the way it is, and that comes with a pride. It comes with a mutual respect. So, give me all the policies in the world, but employees are not going to be thinking at the time they may want to do something that they shouldn't be doing, whether this is a violation of subsection 4 of Article 5 in Chapter 2. It's just going to be, we don't do that around here. And that I really do think is a top-down responsibility. It's just every single day in every way. And the reason I got a little nervous about your answer is that it suggested to me, or this is the implication I have, which may not be true, but that if we write the right policy, that'll take care of it. And you know what? We don't have to write anything, and we can take care of it by having management make it clear that any unwanted advance is totally out of line.
Gentleman yield.
I'm sorry if I misunderstood,
mislead.
Congressman, but I agree with you.
Gentleman yield, just for 1 second. I know you don't have much time. I just have one question. When you were running HR, what does zero tolerance, what does that mean? Because I hope it's not about writing a memo to do a refresher course. Because let me tell you something, the people watching this at the Park Service, when they hear you say that, they say, oh boy, we're in great shape.
Yeah.
Nothing is going to happen. And we'll keep doing what we've been doing. I'm just telling you.
Right.
So tell us, define for all of us, so that other people, when they ask their questions, will know what you meant when you were zero tolerancing.
Well, we need to have a much better fundamental set of professionals.
What did it mean when you were doing the job?
It should mean that we have
No, 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 no. I'm asking you, you were head of HR, am I right? Come on now.
the Workforce Directorate, yeah.
All right. All I'm asking you, the chairman talked about zero tolerance. That was your thing. All I'm asking you is, what did that mean? The reason why I'm asking you this is because I'm trying to predict your future. I'm trying to figure out how you're going to act in this position. Because they got to go back.
Yeah.
And if people listen to you sound them out, I'm going to write a little memo. I'm going to send them a refresher course. Those guys are laughing at you like you are a big joke.
Right.
And you know what happens? They get screwed.
What it means to me is to make...
What it meant to you, what did it mean? And then tell me what it means now.
It meant to me to make the safest place we can for our employees. It meant that they would have the ability to report, that they would be protected. Well, you failed. Yes, we have so far. We have.
Now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Reynolds, I want to tell you, you have managed to do something that I have not seen done in the 5 years I've been here. Peter Welch is one of the more level-headed, reasonable-minded, one of the more decent human beings that you will meet in public service. You have managed to even get him upset. Getting Mr. Cummings and I upset is not as much of a challenge. Getting Peter Welch upset is, and I think what upsets him is when you have a fact pattern of someone spying on another person while they are taking a shower. You don't need a policy change, and you don't need a new memo. You need handcuffs and a trip to the sex offender registry. That's what you need. So, Ms. Martin, you said a couple of things in your statement that resonated with me. You said it is a deep, conflicted, and risky decision for me to come forward and speak up today. And you said many women feel shame and fear of coming forward to report misconduct and cannot bring themselves to be the ones who have the difficult and painful task of speaking up. Here's what I want you to help me do. I want the fear and the difficulty and the pain to belong to the perpetrator, not the victim. So I want you to tell us as much about your fact pattern, your story. And I want you to stop and cite all those instances where something more could have been and should have been done. And do it on behalf of the women who maybe don't have the ability to speak up like you do.
Thank you, Congressman, for this opportunity. It is a very painful and conflicted position that I'm in right now. This happened. I was a victim of Peeping Tom at Grand Canyon in 1987. It was a very difficult and painful experience for me. I reported it to 2 supervisors immediately that first day, that I was able to positively identify a park ranger in uniform that was peering through my bathroom window. I reported it to 2 supervisors, visibly shaken. It was very, very difficult for me to do. It was very embarrassing. I didn't think anybody would actually even believe me that something like this had happened to me. I was given options. I could say nothing and move on. I could file an EEO complaint or a criminal complaint. I had to think about that for a couple of days as to how I wanted to proceed. I was just starting my career in the federal service in my early 20s, and I just did not want to make this an issue. I just did not want to come forward and admitting a complaint like this early in my career and be labeled as a troublemaker. In the end, what I agreed to was a conference or a sit-down with the 2 supervisors that I reported this to, along with the perpetrator. He apologized to me. He assured me that this had never happened before and that it'll never happen again. And so for me, this has been with me my entire career. And so when I think of zero tolerance, I think this is where this was the hardest part for me, it just did not feel like zero tolerance for me. I've had to live with this a long time. This particular individual continued to be moved through the Park Service and just recently retired. So for me, I believe that this was the tipping point for me to come forward and tell my story, that this is why I could no longer remain silent. There's a lot of other women out there that I represent that these very same things have happened, or very similar things, and they just fear that management will not take action, and then we become victims again for coming forward.
So the perpetrator went on and finished his career with the Park Service and is now enjoying the perks of his retirement?
That's my understanding.
Well, I'll just say this. You should never have to choose between your career and justice, ever. You should be able to pursue both of them with all the vigor in the world. So I'm sorry it happened to you, and I appreciate the courage it takes to come and share your story.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize Ms. Plaskett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here this afternoon and sharing this somewhat uncomfortable discussion with us here. We all know that there's an urgent need to stem sexual harassment, discrimination, by increasing female representation in the workforce, and particularly at senior leadership positions, and individuals having a say in how these policies are done. Ms. Martin, you wrote in your prepared statements, I'm going to quote, "The jewels of the Park Service heavily favor men in the most powerful positions of superintendents, deputy superintendents, fire, and law enforcement." Mr. Reynolds, how many national parks are there, and how many park superintendents are women?
We have 413 parks, and as you know, Congresswoman, there's not a superintendent necessarily in every park, so I believe, I'm going to find the actual number for you, but I think it's around 258 superintendents, and I believe about 127 are women. If you just give me a minute, I'll find the right number.
That would be good.
It's about a 60-40, slightly under 40%.
So 60% are
Men.
men. And then those positions below that at the deputy superintendent level?
Deputy superintendents, I have 58% men, 42% female. And I will clarify for you, 62% men, 38 female on superintendents.
Okay, and the parks that the women are superintendents over, are they the same size and scope in terms of geographic size as well as personnel as the men that are superintendents?
You know,
because there are different kinds of superintendents.
Correct. I think it's pretty evenly distributed. We could look at that more carefully, but I have not heard a concern on that level other than our demographic numbers.
Okay, I know that there are 2 initiatives to expand the presence of women in the Park Service. So you said that it seems to be evenly distributed. I mean, it's not exactly what the demographics of our country are, but it seems evenly distributed as much as possible, as wouldn't seem askew. What are the initiatives that you are doing to increase the number of women in that workforce? So we have the same number level at leadership, a 60-40, say you have a 60-40 split. Do you have a 60-40 in terms of at middle management and then in terms of the workers that are in the park?
I'd have to pull out exact numbers, but I think it tracks fairly close to that. We do have women now scattered through in our senior leadership as well, in our regional director ranks, for example, and in our associate director ranks. We have some initiatives in general to diversify the Park Service. We also have a strong majority numbers of our employees, and so we're working across the board. We've set up a new recruitment office to begin to focus the HR community on that very topic.
Okay, I know that you have the Women's Employee Resource Group, the Fire Management Leadership Board. How are they bringing benefit to the Park Service?
Well, I think they're a start. I don't think they're fully achieving their goals, but they bring us some tools and some awareness and some requirement on our leadership to be considering these things in the recruitment
What are
process.
the goals of those initiatives?
Well, the employee resource group, there's a number of them that we're trying to form to give people, again, a safe place to have a cohort to bring forward. For example, if it's the women's, we call them ERGs, Employee Resource Group, then they can bring forward issues important to women in the service. They can represent a voice. They can be a defensive place if they need it, that kind of thing.
And I would be remiss without asking, I know we're talking about sexual harassment against women, but how many people of color do you have as superintendents of parks?
I don't know the answer to that. I can quickly get it to you, though. But I will tell you that our workforce is generally 80% white across the board.
Across the board?
Yeah.
Okay. But I'd like to know how many men, women of color are superintendents and deputy superintendents.
I would be happy to
of
get that
parks.
to you.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Reynolds, what steps has the National Park Service taken in response to the findings of the Grand Canyon's OIG report?
Yes, thank you, Congressman. We have about 18 steps that the OIG asked us to endeavor on, and this included everything from some of the training and awareness kinds of programs that we talked about to disciplinary action.
One of the action items outlined by the Park Service in response to the OIG report is that managers who failed to properly report all allegations of sexual harassment would be held responsible and that appropriate disciplinary action would be taken by May of 2016. To date, what, if any, disciplinary action has the Park Service taken against these managers?
I believe everybody in the canyon, and Mr. Healy can back me up on this, has been removed from the job that they had. The boatman has been removed from the park and is undergoing a disciplinary process as we speak.
Well, as I was listening to testimony earlier, it seemed to me that Mr. Healy felt like some of the action that was taken was more in the context of a promotion than disciplinary action. Is that, did I misunderstand that, or did I hear that correctly?
I'm not aware of any.
I'm Mr. Healy.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, the supervisor of the former river district was given a temporary promotion to another park.
Do you think that was appropriate?
I don't, and a lot of employees at the park feel the same way.
Let me read something to you that I find particularly troubling. It's a quote from the National Park Service expedited investigation, and it's from 2 trained investigators who interviewed some of the victims, and it says it's difficult to articulate in words the emotions that exuded from those interviewed. It says it's apparent that these employees have suffered in their positions and are traumatized by the harassment they are subjected to. During the interviews, the emotions range from inconsolable tears, anger, frustration, helplessness, and regret. In that regard, Mr. Reynolds, do you think appropriate actions have been taken? Your microphone, please.
Sorry. I believe what you were reading from, sir, is the Yosemite expedited inquiry, or is that?
Well, I mean, it seems that there's a pattern across here that women were intimidated, other people were intimidated, they were traumatized.
Yeah.
And you gave one guy a temporary promotion. Has anyone been fired? Has that question been asked, Mr. Chairman? Has anyone been fired? Has anyone been terminated?
No one has been fired yet, no.
It seems to be a pattern.
But disciplinary action are underway. And the one thing that
let me go on and ask you a couple other questions. In November 2015, the OIG found that the deputy superintendent and other managers of Grand Canyon improperly shared personal information of the women who wrote to Secretary Jewell reporting the egregious sexual harassment in the Grand Canyon River District. One former Grand Canyon employee who submitted a statement for the record stated that given the culture of retaliation and hostility towards the victims within the Grand Canyon River District, I, along with the other victims of Diane Chalfont's negligence, am rightfully terrified that the alleged perpetrators will contact us directly to retaliate against us. I'd like to enter that statement into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
What actions has the Park Service taken in response to the disclosure of this personal information?
The actions that we've taken to date is to recognize that there was inappropriate actions for the EEO process.
Well, that's great that you recognized it, but I want to know, has anyone been fired? Has anyone been demoted? I mean,
No, what I can do under the interest of the Privacy Act for these kinds of things is to personally debrief with you on what we're doing with disciplinary actions. I can assure you that they're underway.
all right. I just wonder, given all of this, how any Park Service employees can trust that managers will keep their information confidential, that any Park Service employees can be confident that if they are harassed in any way, that they'll be listened to and that action will be taken to protect them. I find it's disconcerting to me, Mr. Chairman, that we've had hearings with other agencies and that it just seems that this goes on and on and on, and no real punitive actions taken. And as long as we have that stance, as long as no real punitive actions taken, these type things are going to continue to happen. My time has expired. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I'll now recognize myself here. Let me go back to the expedited investigation at Yosemite. It's our understanding of the 21 people the investigators interviewed, every single one of them, with one exception, described Yosemite as a hostile work environment as a result of the behavior and conduct of the park's superintendent. Why isn't there immediate relief?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, that was to me.
Yes.
We are actively engaged. The regional director who's in San Francisco.
Wait, let's explain, let's explore the relationship between Yosemite and the region. Is there a problem with that chain of command there?
The regional office that oversees Yosemite is in San Francisco. We have a regional director. We have a
What about the deputy? Who's that person?
We have 3 deputy regional directors.
Yes.
And 1 is in Seattle, and 2 are in San Francisco, along with the regional director.
Come on, you know what I'm getting at.
One of the deputies is the wife of the superintendent at Yosemite.
So,
and we have, and if I may, Mr. Chairman, we have consciously stovepiped that by having a third party in the Midwest region, our EEO manager, help run the investigative process.
okay, so, but here's the problem. You have these things just spring up overnight, right? This has been a long-standing pattern. You have somebody who's essentially protected and empowered by his wife. I mean, people are afraid of actually coming forward and filing a complaint. I mean, one of the complaints is that the complaints get back to the superintendent. And so when your chain of command and your ability to tell supervisors is impeded by the fact that they're husband and wife, how do you let that happen?
It's even more important why this investigation is important to me to understand if
How
these
long has it been going
allegations
on?
are true. I am not sure, Mr. Chairman.
What do you mean you're not sure? You're the head of the workforce, and then you got a promotion. So,
Yeah, I don't know in terms of what the time scale has been, but that's what I'm asking the investigative teams to look into.
who did the investigative? You mean the Inspector General?
The Inspector General now is involved. We were going to be doing our
Ms.
own.
Martin, can you shine some light on this ongoing problem?
The expedited inquiry took place about the first part of August, so I can appreciate the fact that the investigation is now turned over to the IG, but with substantial credible evidence of a hostile work environment. There was a number of us that did fear that the superintendent did release or did have a list of names when the regional director came out with the expedited inquiry looking for individuals that would be willing to make statements, either in person or written, about their perception of a hostile work environment at Yosemite. So there was a number of us that feared that the superintendent probably got our names. We don't know how. Maybe it was through the regional office. We don't know. But there are people that felt that they were not going to come forward and and provided a statement based upon this expedited inquiry because the superintendent had a list of names ahead of time.
Were there any repercussions for that? I mean, are you aware of anybody who had any sort of retaliation against them because they had stepped forward and made a statement about the reality of what was going on?
Not at this point. Because it still is under investigation, we're not hearing about any, no names have been shared. We only have an informal network of individuals that have come forward, but this is the first time I'm actually hearing what some of the additional allegations are in the statements that have been made.
Can you share with us any of your other personal experience? You mentioned that you had been the victim 3 times, and you were very candid in what happened in the 1980s. But when you came back to the Park Service, what was your experience?
I came back to the Park Service after working for the Forest Service for 16 years. When I came back in 2006, I was very excited that my career was coming back to the Park Service. I really enjoy working for the Park Service. But we're experienced the culture that's very very closed in terms of being able to talk about these difficult issues. And when I came back to the Park Service, my fear is that the first individual that was the perpetrator for my first sexual harassment was still working for the Park Service, and indeed he was. And it was up until just recently that this is why I made the decision to come forward, is that I really felt that it was important to shine light on the fact that this was the tipping point for me and for so many other women that needed to have this heard.
And this was a person who was arrested in 2000, in the year 2000, a high-ranking national park official accused of peeping at naked women at a YMCA. Then there's another incident report in 2001. They were having voyeurism issues. Police officer was sent. This person was found to be behind a home or a building in a highly suspicious behavior in that situation. And again, nothing happens. It seems to be a little bit of a pattern. These are just the ones that they caught. So what were, if you don't mind my asking, I hope you don't, what were the other 2 incidents that happened to you? And then also maybe if you can contrast the difference between Forest Service and Park Service.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other 2 incidents, one, while I was still working at Grand Canyon, I don't remember the exact year, there was an individual that between the Park Service and the Forest Service, we work very closely together on wildland fire, incidents. And so this particular gentleman worked for the Forest Service, took pictures of me and put my pictures up above his visor in his government vehicle, was quite bold about it and showed other people that he had pictures of me in his government vehicle. One day alone at my office on the South Rim of Grand Canyon, he was bold enough to enter my office and tried to kiss me. And I pushed him away and very, very visibly shaken and upset, told a friend of mine about what had happened. Went to his office, the Forest Service office, and proceeded to confront the individual. I never had any problems after that, but I did not feel safe at Grand Canyon. This particular gentleman had applied for the Chief of Fire and Aviation job at Grand Canyon, and at that point I proceeded to notify the Deputy Superintendent at Grand Canyon at that time that this particular individual was sexually harassing me. I do believe that my conversation with the Deputy Superintendent most likely prevented that individual from getting a job at Grand Canyon.
And the other incident?
The other incident was when, after I left the National Park Service, I was working for the U.S. Forest Service, and there was a private, it was a work-sponsored meeting at a private house, and I was sitting next to a superior of mine in my fire chain of command, was sitting on a crowded couch, proceeded to run his fingers through my hair. I immediately got up from the couch to remove myself from the situation. I talked to my immediate supervisor about it the following day. Again, these are very embarrassing situations. It seems so ubiquitous in our culture, in the wildland fire culture, that I just didn't feel that I could expose that as part of preserving my career. But at one point, I did mention it to upper management in the Forest Service, and the appalling reply, when I told him about it, well, it's his word against yours. So I think at that point, I really began to really believe that there is a culture of tolerance and acceptance of this kind of behavior in our workforce. And I have been powerless, although maybe I could have come forward with more formal complaints. I did not. I honestly felt that the preservation of my career status with my peers was more important than filing a complaint.
With some indulgence here, just one more question. Mr. Reynolds, during your time heading the workforce, how many people were fired for sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, or anything in that genre? How many?
I'd have to look up a number and get it to you today, but I am not aware that there were that many fired, to be honest with you, for those actions that you state.
Were there any?
I'll confirm with you. I don't have any recollection of any at this point.
I guess I'd like to know how many complaints were filed during that time.
Yep.
Let's take the end of 2013
Okay.
to present day.
Got it.
How many were complaints happen at any level, and how many people were fired? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having this hearing. Mr. Reynolds, you're the Deputy Director of Operations?
Yes, sir.
So you, in that responsibility, oversee all of the national parks in some fashion?
Through their regional directors, yes.
Yeah. How long have you been in the job?
Since August 1st.
And why did you get placed in that job on August 1st?
We had a retirement of my previous boss, Peggy Odell, and the director asked if I would be willing to be reassigned into that job.
So it wasn't because of some policy shift or shoring up enforcement or making a statement that now we're taking it seriously?
In this case, my understanding is they needed a replacement for our retirement.
Okay, so you were filling.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with that, but I mean,
yeah.
just want to make sure we weren't making a statement trying to deal with what's in front of us here.
No.
So how long have you been with the Park Service?
30 years.
Okay. So it's fair to ask you this question, I think. I mean, I'm looking at the fact that we got problems at the, in the last few years at the Grand Canyon, Cape Canaveral, Yosemite, Yellowstone. I mean, why shouldn't the public be led to believe that, behind the redstones, behind the redwoods, shenanigans are going on. People are being harassed or worse, and nothing is being done about it because the culture is so what kind of culture, frankly. It doesn't take this seriously, which has lots of ramifications for would-be employees in terms of the desirability of service, in terms of the integrity of the National Park Service itself. The public wouldn't think this is a good idea or tolerate it, and it would be very distressed and is distressed to hear these stories repeatedly. So help me understand, is this a systemic culture that has to be weeded out in the National Park Service? And secondly, would you, by way of self-criticism, agree with Ms. Martin that up until now it has frankly not gotten the serious attention it deserved?
I would first like to say that I think a majority of our employees are some of the best serving employees I've ever seen in the federal workplace, including folks like these, and they deserve a much, much better culture than we have. I hope it's not as systemic
Wait.
as it appears to be.
Wait. They deserve a better culture than they have. That seems to be saying there is something
have a problem.
systemically wrong with our culture.
I believe we have a problem.
Okay.
And I believe we should be making very urgent change to that culture.
Do we have, is there training or orientation before I put on that uniform as an employee of the National Park Service?
There is.
On this subject?
There is a little on this subject. It needs to be more.
All right. Tell us what is the SOP, standard operating procedure, when you get a report, whether it's anonymous? I assume you have a hotline, so if I want to protect my identity, I'm Ms. Martin, but I don't want to be fingered because I'm on the job surrounded by the people perpetrating the harassment. So do I have an anonymous hotline I can call and have it followed up on?
Yeah, to clarify, there's a hotline, if you will, a reporting mechanism in each region for the EEO operation. We are establishing a new hotline as well, a third party.
Does that mean that each region has its own SOP?
That, in general, each region has its own offices. They should be operating from one Park Service-wide SOP, and that's something we're shoring up as we speak.
So there is a manual that give me, if I'm a regional director and I'm new in the job, where do I go to get guidance on how we handle these things?
You go right to your EEO officer in the region, and some parks have EEO collateral duty, which is a fancy way of saying other duties as assigned, and they often are in HR, they might be in some other, depending on the size of the park, they might actually have a full-time.
All right, sticking with SOP for a minute, because I'm trying to understand what's going on at the National Park Service. So I'm so-and-so, and I have been harassed. And I go to my supervisor. I don't do it anonymously. And I report that, Fire Ranger X has put the hit on me, and very uncomfortable. I shouldn't have to put up with that. It's degrading, humiliating. I didn't sign up for this, and I want some action. What happens?
They are referred immediately, if the supervisor does their job right, to an EEO specialist or to somebody at the hotline at the place that we were referring to.
But you heard Ms. Martin's testimony. Her testimony is that when that happened, I think, to her, the answer was it's your word against his. Right? Is that right, Ms. Martin?
That's correct.
So, Mr. Reynolds, going to the EEO person didn't work.
Yeah, we've got problems that I have to fix urgently.
Mr. Healy, a lot of the complaints focused on the Grand Canyon, which shocked me. I mean, the Grand Canyon is so spectacularly beautiful. I can't believe that you are focused on anything other than that beauty, but apparently our Park Service rangers are. What's going on in the Grand Canyon by way of trying to address this issue so that it does not recur and that we've actually shifted the culture at one of the great icons on the world, the Grand Canyon?
We do have the Park Service response to the OIG. There's 18 action items, but I think a very positive step was the assignment of our new superintendent, Chris Leonards. I think people at the park feel comfortable with her, and she's she called me on her second day on the job. She's definitely someone that will listen to us, and I think has been approaching our issues directly instead of pretending they aren't there. She's there to make change, and I think that's a big positive step for us.
Just final question, because I know my time is out, and I thank my classmate and friend from Wyoming in indulging me. But, Mr. Healy, would you agree with Mr. Reynolds that we got a lot of reform that has to happen in the culture?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. Mr. Rothman is recognized.
Thank you. First of all, there was an incident referred to by Chairman Chaffetz before, and I'm going to ask Mr. Reynolds about it, a situation where at first blush the wife was kind of over the husband. Is that true?
In that situation, she does not directly supervise her husband. She's in the regional office, which is the next level up, sir.
Okay. How long did that situation exist?
I would have to confirm, but I think it's been many, many years that they've been in service.
I mean, where she's, okay.
Yeah, long-serving deputy.
Office
yeah. Maybe more than 10 years at least.
Okay. I'll give you another general question, and this to me is just more evidence why no matter how tempting it may seem to my colleagues, You never, ever, ever want the government to do anything more than they have to. Mr. Healy, one more question for Mr. Reynolds. You said that you never knew since you were the head of HR anybody being fired for sexual harassment, right? You couldn't remember that?
Yeah, I'm going to follow up for the chairman on
know.
the data, but it didn't hit. I was managing systems and processes.
How long were you head of HR in this region?
2 years.
2 years. How many people you have under you?
There's about 18,000 permanents, upwards of 20,000 by the time the seasons come in.
So you were the HR head of over 18,000 people, right?
In general, the way our system works is our regions actually run their own HR programs. We have sort of the overarching system and process oversight.
Do you know in those 2 years how many people were let go, period, for anything?
We fire quite a few, upwards of at least 100 people a year for various infractions.
Okay, what do they usually do?
There are often conduct issues. They might be caught stealing, or they might be the normal range of things that you might have happen.
Okay, Mr. Healy, thanks for coming by. We got to ask you some questions. How pervasive is retaliation at the Park Service?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
How pervasive do you think retaliation is at the Park Service?
You know, my experience is limited to Grand Canyon, and it's with a couple of the individuals that are still at the park. I think there's a pretty extensive pattern of that, and that was all described by the OIG during their investigation.
Okay, you afraid of retaliation for showing up and talking to us today?
Yeah, I am somewhat, yeah. Yes.
Okay. I guess this question is kind of obvious, but do you feel the Park Service has adequately held managers accountable for their part in allowing harassment to occur at Grand Canyon?
I don't at this time. I'm optimistic for the future, but you know, it's been quite a while since the OIG investigation came out and the Park Service response to that, and you know, we're in September and we still haven't seen some of the individuals that were implicated by the OIG leave.
Slow moving. Maybe I'll switch back to Mr. Reynolds. Are any of these managers under any jeopardy of losing their job for their slow moving here?
Again, as I offered earlier, I'd be happy to talk to you in person or the chairman.
Again, are they in jeopardy? I mean, for this poking around here?
For many of these actions, as they are found true, yes, they are in jeopardy.
Okay. Mr. Healy, according to your testimony, a former supervisor at the Grand Canyon District breached confidentiality of victims and was given a temporary promotion to Chief Ranger. That true? What effect does that have on the morale of the employees when they see this sort of thing going on?
I think it has a severe impact. I think it really does. I think that was probably a setback for employee morale and moving forward after this thing. You know, this is a really, really big deal for employees.
What was his position before and what was he promoted to?
He was supervisory park ranger, I believe, and his temporary promotion was chief ranger at a park, so the highest ranger position at another park, from what I understand.
Okay. Would you feel comfortable saying what park? I won't have you do that, probably.
It's Curicanti, Black Canyon of the Gunnison area. It's in Colorado.
Okay, okay. Okay, interesting. I'll go back to Ms. Martin. I'll ask you the same question. How common do you think retaliation is at NPS?
Thank you, Congressman, for that. I'm fearful more of the repercussions, the retaliation I have not been a victim of, and I think everybody knows that by coming forward, we're trying to really, truly have a stronger conversation about what sexual harassment is and a hostile work environment is. So I actually feel somewhat confident that retaliation will not happen, but there are people that do fear that and will not come forward with honest statements.
Could the retaliation mean they feel they're less likely to be promoted themselves in the future?
Yeah, I think, people just don't want to really rock the boat. They don't really want to come forward for what they really see is going on. So there's a handful of us that believe that this is an extremely important topic to bring forward. And so I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess, that we will not be retaliated against.
Okay, Mr. Reynolds, in your past statements, you said you were doing what you can to increase the number of women in management positions at the Park Service. Could you elaborate?
We are beginning to venture into a much more aggressive recruitment. We've opened a recruitment office that we really have not had. Recruitment's been done at the supervisory management level. So we're trying to begin to centralize that to focus on both diversity in all of its forms.
Okay. Well over my time, so thanks for being patient with me.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Micah is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman and Ranking Member. I hadn't been able to participate. I got waylaid on a host of other things, but I did stay up last night and read some of the testimony and the staff report. It was absolutely appalling to see what took place in some of these instances. And it also, to me, is disgraceful that the federal government could be a partner into the abuse of women and employees and others and let them be subject to this type of activity. I just was stunned at what's going on. When we came into the majority in 1995, I was the first Republican chairman of civil service in 40 years, and I got to look at the civil service system. And you want a civil service system, and it was created to protect employees from political interference, but it wasn't created to protect them when they abuse their fellow employees, violate laws, protocols, rules. And that's what I read page after page. It's just stunning. And then I saw the movement of people from within the agency, from department to department. The one case, and I'm sure it's been relayed here, where you get promoted after you commit sexual acts that no one would tolerate in any other form of employment. Okay, sat here, I've sat through IRS, I've sat through, I never remember, or never forget the head of Secret Service. She came to me after she was brought in, Julia, she went to the University of Central Florida, was a police officer, eminently qualified, first female Secret Service director. And after she was there for a while, she came in and she says, "This is almost impossible to control. I need assistance to determine, well, to be able to hire and fire poor performers." And that's what whether it's Secret Service, whether it's IRS, whether it's GSA, FBI, other agencies, we have, and some of them are exempt. There's exempt and non-exempt. Mr. Reynolds, are your hands tied?
Congressman, thank you for bringing this up. It is a complex system that you know better.
It's very complex. It's very difficult for you to navigate, and
Yes.
it can take a long time to get rid of these people.
I don't want to cop out by saying it's the process, right?
Well, I'm not copping out either, but I'm telling you, it's the process. We've set up a system where nobody gets fired. And when you do egregious things, you don't get fired. It's easier to transfer them around, and we've seen examples. I read it last night, and it didn't let me sleep well last night.
There is a GAO report that says it takes us 6 months to a year to terminate people at times.
And that would be a speedy termination. And the alternative is actually that they're moving people into other positions. And then what kind of message does it send when they actually get elevated? One of the most troublesome cases was getting elevated to one of the highest positions, and everybody knew what was going on. It's disgraceful. Well, I think that the way to cure this is, again, you want to protect. We want to protect people. We have thousands and thousands of wonderful employees in the federal government. You got them in the Park Service. I've seen them. They stay there late. They work extra time. They neglect sometimes their family, but they serve the public. They're public servants. Got a few rotten apples in the barrel, and they're staying in the barrel. And it's, to me, it's disgraceful that we haven't fixed the system that allows you to do your duty to clear the deck of people who need to be fired, removed, and held accountable. Would you agree with that?
I agree. We need to move as fast as we can.
Well, again, Madam Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing. This is an important hearing. This is to the core of the problem we have across the spectrum of the federal government. I thank you and yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman from Florida. I have 7 statements that I would like to include in the record without objection, so ordered. Mr. Healy, have you ever seen someone, let's say a problem person, a sexual predator, within the National Park Service, either transferred laterally or promoted?
I don't believe so.
Ms. Martin, have you ever seen someone who was known to be a problem employee for the reasons we're meeting today, either transferred laterally to a different NPS property or promoted?
If you refer to my testimony regarding my first sexual harassment incident at Grand Canyon, that is an example of how an individual was laterally moved and promoted.
Well, what we've heard today are terms like toxic work culture, a closed culture. We've heard go along to get along culture. And we know that within the National Park Service, there are plum assignments. People will stay regardless of how long it takes or what they have to put up with to get to some of those crown jewel properties because they love their jobs so much. In some respects, that's rewarding loyalty. In other respects, it can create a toxic work culture. And it appears that the National Park Service, especially since we've had reports of this for 16 years, and that these matters are not being adequately addressed, that perhaps promotion from within has actually hurt the National Park Service from addressing cultural, systemic problems in this area. So I will be asking the chairman and ranking member of this committee to prepare memos to the transition teams for both the Democratic and Republican presidential candidates to inform them of what is in the record here about what is going on at the National Park Service in terms of a toxic work culture and how maybe it's time to get, as Mr. Micah said, some of the rotten apples that are still in the barrel out of the barrel. And maybe that's going to require people who have made this their career and have been looking forward to being considered for some of the very highest positions within the National Park Service to not attain those goals. Because this has been tolerated. It has not been swept under the rug, and now some of the people in leadership positions are just finding out about it. It has been tolerated. And it appears that people have tolerated this in order to advance their careers. into the highest positions in the National Park Service. It is time to ferret out that kind of toxic culture. And either new president is going to be in a position to do that. So I will ask the chairman of this committee and the ranking member to prepare memos to the transition teams of the Democratic and Republican nominees for president and present them to them. So when they're going through transition and preparing people to go before Senate committees for confirmation, that they know exactly what's going on in the National Park Service and they are prepared to address these problems. I thank you for your testimony today. It builds on testimony that we have in writing. It builds on reports that we've had for 16 years that have gone inadequately addressed. It informs the next president that they better start lawyering up these agencies with people who are experts in personnel rules and disciplinary rules, because they're going to take a whole bunch of people through processes that have not been used enough within the National Park Service. I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
I want to thank the chair lady, and for your words, and I agree that it would be a good idea to get those letters out to the two transition teams, and I think hopefully it'll have some impact. To you, Ms. Martin, to you, Mr. Healy, I thank you for coming forward. This is not easy. Can't be. When I think about you, Ms. Martin, having left and then come back, and I was just reading the file of the person who was a peeping Tom. You should not have had to go through that. And you know, I often think about how people come to work every day. Sometimes they have things that they have to struggle with at home. All of us do. And then but no matter what, they get up, they come to work. And when you've got a job like the ones that you all have, dealing with the public, you got to put on a good face, and you got to be the best that you can be. But the idea that you come to work and you've got people who place you in a position of discomfort, knowing that they could have not only an impact on your career, but on your way of life, and then to be able to function at your maximum with all of that over your head, that's quite a bit. And then to seemingly have a administration at the Park Service that through neglect or just a sheer sense of lack of urgency does not back you up, that's a problem. The other thing that I guess that goes through my head is what I said a little bit earlier. You've been bold enough to come here to give your testimony, and the idea that you might not have the impact that you wanted to have and go back and get hurt because you stepped forward is the worst thing that could happen. So I want to vow to you, and I'm sure our committee, everybody on this committee feels the same way, and let me send a message to all of those who are thinking about retaliating or bringing harm, that we will come after you with everything we've got. there's no way that we will correct this culture if you have to be in fear and if they have the position that they can do whatever they want and get away with it. And to those who feel that way, that feel that they want to retaliate, I would invite them to leave the Park Service. Go do something else. Because we want our employees to be able to be content. We want them to we want them to have a normal employee-employer existence, normal. This is not normal. It's not. It's got to be stressful. Every day. Watching your back. Who's going to hurt you? Who's going to block your path? What's going to happen when you come up for a promotion? Who's going to be whispering things? Oh, she's not this or he's not that. And then you never even know who did it. So all of that, that's got to be stressful. And then I go back to what you said, Mr. Martin, with regard to that whole balancing thing. Do I tell or do I be quiet? Do I say something? Because if I say something, my career may be ruined. And then what am I going to do? How am I going to feed my family? Those are real decisions. And so, you know, I know there's a survey coming out, Mr. Reynolds, but the thing that struck me is that 16 years ago, a similar survey came out. Is that right? And when folks were asked about sexual harassment, they were asked this question: have you personally experienced sexual harassment? 52%, hello, 52% of the respondent females in law enforcement positions in the Park Service said yes. And an astounding 76% of the respondent females in the United States Park Service answered yes. What's that about? And did you see that? Did you see those things when you were there? You know, we talked about these incidents. When you held the position that you held, head of HR, whatever you called it, did you see some of this?
I did see incidences come through in terms of cases. We haven't had the data to understand it the way that survey describes, which is why we want to do a second, you know, this new survey, and to do it right this time.
But this was 16 years ago.
Yes.
All right. We've got problems.
Yes, sir.
And we got to correct them.
And I would like to say that I will personally ensure, and you may hold me absolutely accountable, that these people will be protected with their careers and their lives.
And see, they know the names. They know the names. They know the names. But you know what? You can know the information and know the names. But when you've got this culture, even giving up just the mere giving up the names will cause them stress. Am I right, Ms. Martin?
Without a doubt. I know that I'll be probably more, I'll be facing serious repercussions, but I just have to go on record to tell you that I have a tremendous amount of support of women behind me. They could not do this, but the other important thing is that there's men that want to see our culture change too.
Well, that leads me to my last statement, and I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that. And I want to say this to all the people that you just talked about, the ones that back you up, the ones that care, the ones that support you.
Absolutely.
They are, and they got to understand that they are the solution. They really are. They have to be that critical mass. They've got to stand up. They've got to back you up. And then hopefully more and more will come forward. And if changes need to be made at the top, they need to be made. But they have to change it, help us change it. Because they are there. You're on the ground. They're the witnesses. Okay? I've often said, through our pain must come our passion to do our purpose. Your pain has allowed you to come here with a passion. And that passion has allowed you to do your purpose. And hopefully we'll be able, that purpose will be about bringing a new day, to the Park Service by shining a bright light on its problems. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. The tone is set at the top, so the tone has to change going forward. I want to thank our witnesses. Mr. Healy, thank you for coming here and for your bold statements. Ms. Martin, thank you for your testimony today and for representing other people within the National Park Service who are similarly situated, but your ability to speak on their behalf is deeply appreciated by this committee. Mr. Reynolds, thank you for your testimony today. You've got your hands full. I hope you're up to the task. God bless you in your work there. With that, the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.